morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody had a wonderful week. I had a great week myself. Pretty much prepared for Christmas, and I think I've got everything ready at this point. Couple little things. You know, there's always one or two little things left to do, but really think I got everything done. So good week, and glad to be here. Couple announcements real quick. If you haven't turned in any thoughts or ideas for the next class, please do. I'll need to make that decision probably in the next week or so, because we should be today. Hopefully we'll get through everything that I've got planned for today, and we'll have maybe one or two more classes before we begin the next whatever study we're going to do. Also, we're still doing the donations for the homeless up front here. If you have anything you want to donate for the homeless, please put it on the table. Blankets, socks, little Debbie cakes, stuff like that. Something that those folks that are less fortunate might be useful to them, and also not necessarily practical things as well. Just something that might warm their heart, to let people know that there are others thinking about them and their comfort. So that's pretty much the announcements. We do have, of course, tonight the banquet, the Christmas banquet. So I hope to see you all there. As far as I know, that's all the announcements for the day. So let's begin. Before we begin, though, who will say a prayer and we'll get things started? You got it, Mike?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much once again for bringing us here together as a class to hear the words brought to us by our brother Charles, the great servant that you brought to us, dear God. We thank you so much for that, and we ask you to open up our minds so we can understand your true word today. All these things are only possible because of your grace and mercy for us, and because of your Son, Jesus Christ of Nazareth.
Amen. Awesome. All right. So, jokes for the day. I got a couple I think are pretty decent. But we'll see. You guys will be the judge, right? So little girl after church, her grandfather had come over to visit after church. And so the little girl came up to her grandfather. She said, "Grandpa, can I sit on your lap?" And he said, Sure you can. And so she sat on her grandfather's lap, and she said, "Well, grandfather, can you make a sound like a frog?" And so he was just a little, puzzled by that, right? And he says, "Well, sure, I can make a sound like a frog." And the girl said, "Well, Grandpa, will you please make a sound like a frog?" And so her granddad said, "Sweetheart, why is it you want me to make a sound like a frog so bad?" And little girl said, "Well, because Daddy said that when you croak, we're going to Disney World." All right. So that one you liked, huh? All right. All right, so Sunday school class, the subject for the class was Proverbs. So the teacher said, "Can anyone give me a proverb about parents?" And so the teacher asked the students, and how about a proverb about fathers, perhaps? Well, little girl raised her hand, and she says, "Well, my mommy has a proverb about my daddy, and there's no fool like an old fool." All right. No, you don't like that one? All right. All right, this is they ain't gonna get you to Disneyland. You're right. So this one, this is another joke about Sunday school, right? So one of the students said to the teacher, he said, "I have a question." And teacher said, "Yes, Jay. What's your question?" And so the man asked, "Is there a Christian flea?" And he said, "What on earth puts that into your head?" Well, the preacher today read from the Bible and said, "The wicked flee when no man pursueth." Well, Jay, that means that the wicked men flee. It doesn't mean that there's a wicked flea, right? And so then the man said, "Well, is there a woman flea?" And he says, "No, it means that the wicked flee, they run away, not that their men are fleas, and or men fleas." And he says, "Who, the wicked flees?" He says, "No, don't you see, the wicked man runs away when no man is after him." So then he said, is there a woman after him? He said, Jay, we have no more time for today. All right. So that's our jokes for the day. At least y'all liked one. All right. So as we begin today, just to kind of recap where we left everything in our last class, of course, we're still studying the time in David's life where Absolom has taken over the kingdom, and David has fled. Oh, yeah. Before I begin, Bruce, from what I had heard, wanted to read the Ten Commandments for us.
This might sound foolish to some people, but the Ten Commandments, the reason why I'm an advocate about the Ten Commandments is because I started back a couple of years ago realizing that there was a lot of pornographic books in the school libraries, and I was adamant about trying to get the books out of the library. It's not that easy, no matter what they are. And I wrote letters to the governor, the newspapers. I was on channel 2, 4, 5. They wouldn't look at the books because they were so graphic. And talked to the Miss Weaver, in charge of the state school board, and talked to the school boards, and I had a lot of pushback. And I didn't only have pushback about the books, but I had pushback about Christianity, etc. And it was amazing how many people, from not just from Charleston or the North Country, but here, that push back all the time. And I realized that there are a lot of people that talk, but they don't do anything about it. So they allow kids, even if they don't have kids in school, they'll say, oh my God, the kids are so bad today. And the reality is us that are responsible for that. And I have two children. My wife and I have two children, 11 and 12. And I got older ones too, just as old as you, in their 50s. And I've never had to have such an involvement in school, and I did, but I never had to have that involvement. I had it for sports and activities back then. Now I have to make sure that the teachers are doing the right things. I had my daughter come to me one day at the dinner table and say that there was a kid in school, she thought she was a cat, and they put a kitty litter in the school. So I had to pick up the phone and have a conversation with them to realize that this person that was mentally ill needed to be, get some help. And so that brought me to the basics. And we always do a lot of things, but we never go back to the basics. And I think the Ten Commandments is the basics. And so I've been running around different schools, churches, municipalities, to put the Ten Commandments against the wall. And I was shocked to realize that other than this, and I got in the Methodist Knightsville Church, there's no other Ten Commandments that you can find in any of the churches. It's a shame. But this is one of the basics. So what I did is, I said, okay, I'm gonna pay for have this done, so that maybe through osmosis or just by accident you read them and something will be grabbed hold of. So this is from Exodus. And the first one is, I'm the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other God before me. Number 2, you shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, that is in the earth beneath, or in the water underneath the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I am the Lord your God, and am a jealous God, visiting the inquires the father upon the child to the 3rd and 4th generation. You shall not make the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day. When I was growing up, all the stores were closed on the Sabbath day. My father would get in the car, go to downtown, pick up the newspapers, the 3 or 4 newspapers, and there was nothing else open. And he had a business, and he even only opened till 11 or 12 o'clock. Honor your father and mother. Some days I wonder if my kids will ever understand that. My 2 youngest ones. They're a challenge sometimes. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. And that's happening all the time. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. And you shall not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet. It's so basic, but do you remember them? Do you follow them? Just 1 or 2 would be great. And Mike came over to me this morning and said, you know what? Not everyone has that. I said, no, the Catholics don't have it, the Jews don't have it. We fight even the basic needs in respect to ourselves. Sad, isn't it? Really sad. Anyway, so that's the purpose of me trying to push the Ten Commandments up onto the church's walls. You would think that'd be the first place. There is a bill out there now in Columbia. I don't worry about Washington because we got enough problems here. I think most of our effort should be here in Columbia. And there's a bill up there right now. It's been there since July, and it went into committee, meaning that it sits there and no one gets off their cushions to do anything about it. And I've called them and written each one of the representatives that are sponsoring it. And I ask anyone to go up if you need more information on that, to entice these people to actually do what they're supposed to do and represent us. That'd be great. But we can get it through. Some people say, well, it's against the Constitution, it's against the law. I don't believe that. It's what we want that makes our world go around, not what someone wants. Anyway, thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Bruce. Awesome. And I agree completely. The Ten Commandments are the basics, and should be something we all hold dear, not just, something that we brush off. Very good. All right. So to recap where we left things last week, we had just. Oh, did it shut off? Well, that's not good, huh? Where'd I put the? Yeah, that's weird. Is that what it is? It decided it wanted to be a pain? I wonder if it shut off at the breaker because it's not coming on. There it goes. I just didn't point it right. Okay. Let me try it again, guys. I apologize. Technical difficulties.
Start the new lesson stuff?
Probably within the next 2 weeks, depending upon how far we get today. So.
You get any volunteers to do the testimony?
I have one that has said he would like to, but he's kind of been pushing me off on actually doing it. So, all right, let's try that. See if that fixed it. I hope. So that's a good question. If anybody does want to give their testimony, certainly I'd love for you to do it. And it doesn't necessarily, again, it doesn't have to be your testimony either. It can also be, if you have just something that you think would be useful for the class. What on earth is going on?
Well, it's not the whole church. Children's church will be pretty boring today.
No, it's not that. It's the signal between my computer and the screen is the issue. It's not internet.
Maybe you're on HDMI 2 or something?
No.
Are you plugged in one or two?
There we go. I got it. That should fix it.
Oh, that's good. It's taking a while.
Sorry.
There you go.
When's the last
There it
day
is.
to bring in donations for the homeless?
I believe next week. Okay. So let's try this again. Escape. Start from beginning. Bear with me.
No signal detected. You want me to?
I think I figured out what's going on. There we go. Just a second, guys. There we go.
That'll do it.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you for noticing. I apologize, but we got her. All right. So that means the first part of my video is really going to be messy for the video that goes on YouTube, huh? All right. So where we left everything, like I said, is basically Ahithophel has told Absalom that he scorched earth, right? He's given the advice that Absalom should defile the concubines of David, right, and do it publicly, which he does. And then he gives the counsel, and remember, Ahithophel is the grandfather of Bathsheba, right? So I'm sure some of his counsel there is because of that, because of his being upset with David and with Bathsheba and Uriah. Also, Ahithophel, when we last week, he had given the counsel, as we read, for David. He wanted 12,000 men, and he was going to pursue David immediately, as he said, right? And he said, look, I'll go down and I'll strike the king alone and cause all the people to return to you. And that's what we left on last week. And that's the right counsel, right? That's exactly what Absalom should do. But as we recall, God had sent a man to help David. When David had done the prayer to God and saying, hey, let Ahithophel's counsel be bad, right? And so the Lord sent an advocate for David, who David then told him to go back to the city. And we're going to actually see what his counsel is and how he goes about getting Absalom to not take Ahithophel's counsel. But like we talked about last week, or we began to talk about last week, this is the right thing. Had Absalom done this, then David would have died, because we're talking 12,000 men against a very small group. And David was fleeing. He was on the run. He had not set up any kind of, he wasn't anywhere fortified. He was literally on the run. He had no army behind him, per se. He had a few stragglers, and he literally, as we recall, had rocks being thrown at him by people, right? Not really the most comfortable of positions, right? So he was in a vulnerable state. If you literally have, the ability for a man to come up and throw rocks at you, I wouldn't say you're in very well protected position, right? So had Ahithophel listened, had Absalom listened to Ahithophel, David would have been no more. But as we know, God in his providence has things go the way they should go, the way he wants them to go. And we're going to see that happen today. So that's kind of where we left everything last week. So to begin us off, let's read what Hushai gives Absalom for his counsel for what to do. Who will read for me 2 Samuel 17, 5-9?
Then Absalom said, call now Hushai and the Archite also, and let us hear what is also in his mouth. Then Hushai came to Absalom, and Absalom spoke to him, saying, Ahithophel has spoken thus. Shall we carry out his word? If not, you speak. And Hushai said to Absalom, this time the counsel that Ahithophel has counseled is not good. Then Hushai said, you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are bitter of soul, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is a man of war, and will not spend the night with the people. Behold, he has now hidden himself in one of the caves or in another place, and it will be when he falls on them at the first attack, that whoever hears it will say, there has been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom.
So, a few things here, right? First of all, Absalom wants a second opinion, right? And thankfully, he calls on the man that God, in providence, God's providence, had sent to David to be the answer for Ahithophel's counsel, right? Hushai. And David had told him, please go back and you'll be on my side. You will be the counter to Ahithophel. And so Hushai does that, right? And you notice he doesn't just flatter Absalom. He doesn't flatter him blindly, but and Ahithophel for that matter. But he does basically say that Ahithophel's plan is unwise. Because he says, look, and Hushai said to Absalom, this time the counsel that Ahithophel has counseled is not good. So it's kind of giving the impression that normally Ahithophel's counsel is really good, and usually we'd want to listen to him, but this time it's not so great, or it's not the best, right? And so he's critiquing the plan without really attacking Ahithophel's reputation. That's really smart, very smart, very sly, right? And also, you get more flies with honey. I know y'all have heard that before, right? So he's trying to be very kind in his rebuke of Ahithophel's words, right? And so then Hushai plant basically paints a picture of David as a mighty warrior, right? And of course, he's known as the mighty warrior of the kingdom because of his history. And so he effectively predicts that even a small loss by Absalom would be devastating. That even if they go and even retreated, that this would cause, a huge devastating slaughter, is the way he words it, right, amongst the people. And that would cause basically Absalom to lose power, right, out of fear. He's using fear as a narrative here to try and get Absalom to fear David. And quite frankly, he says, behold, David has now hidden himself in one of the caves or in another place. He says he will not spend the night with the people. That's the opposite of what's true. He has spent the night with the people. That's exactly what's going on. And he's not in some cave. He's not hiding out in a place. He's not bearing up soldiers and all that. He is just fleeing with the people right now. And so he's saying that your father is men, they're mighty men, they're bitter of soul. So he's saying he's going to be angry, he's upset, he's mad, and he's going to be like a bear robbed of their cubs, right? And he's painting a picture of David being powerfully angry, right? And fear. He's using fear to try and sway Absalom, right? And then comes the bait, right? Ultimately, he's told all this, and next he's going to kind of bait him a little bit. We'll see that next. So who'll read for me 10 through 14? Because he's not finished. That was the first half of what he said. Here's the second half. Yes.
And even the one who is a man of valor, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will utterly melt. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are men of valor. But I counsel that all Israel be utterly gathered to you, from Dan even to Beersheba, as the sand that is by the sea in abundance, and that you personally go into battle. So we shall come to him in one of the places where he can be found, and we will set down on him as the dew falls on the ground, and of him and of all the men who are with him, not even one will be left. If he withdraws into a city, then all Israel shall carry ropes to that city, and we will drag it into the valley until not even a small stone is found there. Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel, for Yahweh had ordained to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that Yahweh might bring calamity on Absalom.
Very good. And so notice here the second part of what he's saying here, he leads this whole fear thing, right? And he says that, even if you lose a small battle, that will cause all the people to fall away from you, right? And the last thing you want to do is even lose a small battle against David. And he says, even the one who is a man of valor, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt before David, right? He's basically saying all our people are going to be fearful of David because he's a mighty man. And the men are with him are mighty men and men of valor, right? But I counsel that all Israel be gathered to you. So he's saying you should have everyone on your side, right? Which is a huge undertaking, guys. That's not something you do overnight. To gather up 12,000 men like Ahithophel counseled, sure, he's got that easy, right? That's just the army that's probably right there in the city. But what Hushai's basically saying is let's get everybody in on this, the whole nation in on this. And that's not simple, right? That's a very hard task to do. And he's basically saying, because, David is such a mighty man, we're going to need everybody. It's not true. It's just truly not true. And he says, after that, Dan to Beersheba is the sand that's by the sea, and then you personally go into battle. So he's telling him, you should go into battle. You should lead the troops. And that's vanity, guys. He's appealing to the vanity of Absalom. Men of pride tend to fall for vanity, right? to being the man, right? Men or women of pride, doesn't matter what your orientation is. But people of pride tend to fall by that same pride. And so he's using pride and his Absalom's vanity against him in that. And so then he says, so we shall come to one place where they be found. We'll set on him like the dew falls on the ground, and all the men who are with him. Not one will be left. If he withdraws in the city, then all Israel shall carry ropes to that city, drag it in the valley, right? Then Absalom and all the men said, the better counsel is Hushai, which is what God wanted, right? Ultimately what God had planned. So this is basically what God ordained to thwart Ahithophel's counsel so that he can bring calamity to Absalom's plans. And this isn't luck, right? This is literally God's provision, God's guidance here that has made this happen. But Absalom he's preferring the flashy plan, the one where everybody's behind him. You're the ruler, right? Because that's what he's after anyway. He's after the fame of this. He's not after helping the people. He's wanting the fame of it, the pride of it, the flash of it. So the flashier plan is everybody sees me win in battle, not just 12,000 people, right? So again, everything that Hushai is doing here is designed to get Absalom to want to do this plan because it's the one that brings him the glory instead of God the glory. And unfortunately, that's, again, most people that are driven by pride, that's what they fall for, right? So Scripture holds two truths for us at once. Humans choose and are morally responsible, right? So God sovereignly made all this happen, right? But the choice is still whose? Absalom's, isn't it? He still chose which path to take. Even though God set the stage, Absalom made the choice. So who ultimately is responsible? Absalom is responsible for what comes of this, right? Now, God knows our heart. He knows our heart beyond even we knowing our heart, right? He crafted our heart. He knit us in our mother's womb, as Scripture tells us. So he also knows exactly what we need to hear to be motivated as well. And so, of course, the counsel that Hushai has given is divinely inspired. It's words that God has placed in his mind that he knew would have the effect on Absalom that needed to have, right? And that was to appeal to his vanity, appeal to his pride, appeal to his desire to be the big man that everybody sees win, right? And that's what will be his ultimate downfall. But God gives us all a choice, and even here is the out that I know you all have heard me say it more than once. God will always give you an out. Always give you an out when you're about to sin. There'll always be a chance for you to go away from that. Here's his chance, right? Because he's continuing to sin after sin after sin. And yet, rather than falling on his knees and asking for forgiveness for what he's already done, he's going to continue to sin and seeking glory for himself rather than seeking glory for God. So, God answered prayer, didn't he? He answered the prayer of David in a mighty way here through Hushai. And God always answers prayer. May not always be the answer we expect, but he always answers prayer. Sometimes he answers it by not answering it, in that his answer is no. But he answered David's prayer here. And I also want you to notice that God is effectively weaponizing Absalom's pride against him. He's using his pride, his sin, against him. And much like we'll find in our own lives, your sin will become your stumbling block. Your sin will become what is the consequence of your actions, will be what hurts you. And hopefully brings you back to God. But the point of that is it's to bring you back to God. And a good real world illustration here, and a classic pattern, if you will, in military history, is the overcomplicated plan is the one that's going to fail. Most plans in military, they want it to be simple, easy to implement, easy to do. And Hushai's plan is hugely complex compared to Ahithophel's, right? It's let's bring the whole nation together for this. That's not easy to do. Every town, every city, they're going to have to send out messengers everywhere to let everybody know what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a simple plan. So again, it should have been easy to see that this was not the best plan. But he used fear and he used pride to make the case, right? So beware of counsel that inflates your ego and calls it wisdom, because it's not wisdom. Pride, loves big plans because it feels like then I get the glory, right? But the problem is, if you have to choose between something that's impressive or something obedient, always we should pick obedient over impressive, right? If you're looking for something that is going to bring you glory, that's the opposite of what you should be looking for. Look for what's going to bring God glory first, and what you're obedient in. God's not impressed by what we do, right? God doesn't need anything from us, and nor is he impressed by our acts. There's several verses that say effectively what we do, our good acts are even an abomination. So if we hold our connection with humility, if we stand with the thought in our head that we want to glorify God, then God will do what we're seeing here. He will work on our behalf to make it happen. And that's what's happened here. So, discussion question. How can we tell the difference between wise planning and prideful planning? How can we tell the difference between a counsel that is appealing to our vanity, appealing to our pride, or counsel that is truly good and Christian?
By who gets the glory?
That's a good start. Exactly. That's a very good start. The very first thing that we can look at is, where does the glory lie when this ends, right? Is it something that's going to build me up or build God up? Good point. Any other thoughts? Yes.
I think too, from the person that it's coming from, like if there's someone who generally has our best interest in mind most of the time, I feel like we can trust that. But if it's just somebody, arbitrary, kind of just, they don't have a history of being for us.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. So the source of the counsel is just as important as the counsel. Absolutely. And I would even say that their connection to God is equally as important, even
more so.
right, than just whether or not they are our advocate. I agree. Any other thoughts? Very good. No? All right. Yeah, and the other thing that I would say with that is think of it from the standpoint of complexity, right? Usually, the more complex something is, the harder it is to accomplish. God likes simple things, right? God likes simple things, simple people, simple plans, which is why the gospel is so simple. It's so simple, so deep, but so simple, right? Because it's easy for anyone to understand. And when you begin doing things with such complexity, that's moving away from God's general wisdom of simple is better. Okay, so that would be the other thing that I would say to tell the difference between wise planning and prideful planning. Because look, the guy that wants to feel like, even look, the person giving you counsel, there's some pride in that as well. They may be taking pride, and we're going to see that here in a minute. What happens with Ahithophel and Hushai after this? But the person giving the counsel, sometimes they're doing it not like Reagan was saying for your best interest. They're doing it simply for their own pride. Because, hey, this brings me glory if I give you a good plan. So once again, they're not seeking the glory of God, they're seeking their own glory, and that many times also can be a problem. So we got to be careful that we understand that the person giving the counsel also can be beholden to that same pride and that same trap. All right? All right, very good. So who will read for me then 17:15 through 18? Got it? All right.
Then Hushai said to Zadok and to Abiathar the priest, "This is what Ahithophel counseled Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is what I have counseled. So now send quickly and inform David, saying, do not spend the night at the fords of the wilderness, but by all means cross over, lest the king and all the people who are with him be swallowed up." Now Jonathan and But a boy did see them and informed Absalom. So the two of them went quickly and came to the house of a man in Bethura, who had a well in his courtyard, and they went down into it.
Very good, thank you. So Hushai immediately, as David and him had planned beforehand, goes to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, right? And tells them, here's the plan that Ahithophel gave, here's the plan I gave. Seems like they're going to follow my plan, right? And he says, so make sure you don't spend the night on this side of the river. Make sure you cross over and you get, further away. And that, basically, otherwise you're going to get eaten alive, right? You're going to get swallowed up, as he says. Jonathan and Ahimaaz are who are supposed to be the runners, right? They're going to take the message from Abiathar and Zadok and give it to David, right? So they're kind of like the messengers, if you will. And so it tells us that they were staying in a town called Enrogel, and a servant woman would be the one that informed them, and then they in turn would take the message to David, right? But somebody saw him, right? Saw this interaction happen, and obviously is going to tip off to Absalom what's going on, and informed him, right? So they went and they came to a house of a man in Bahurim who had a well in his courtyard, and they went down into it. So they're hiding, right? They know that Absalom is going to send men for them to search for them so that they can't get this message back to David. And if they don't get this message back to David, he might well be taken, right? He might well be gotten by this group of Ahithophel, Absalom. So they're spotted. It's not good. A couple theological lessons that we can do from this, right? God preserves his people, us, his community, through community, right? Notice that the priests, right, the servants, the woman here and all that, they are basically running, you've got Jonathan and Ahimaaz running for their lives, effectively, afraid, but there's people that are helping them, right? Just like God will send people to help you, right? Just like in your situations, whatever you have going on in your life, you'll find that if you pray to God, ask for God's assistance, he'll bring that assistance primarily through those others that are your brothers and sisters in Christ. Okay? He can use anyone, but primarily it will be from our own community. And a good realistic example here is underground churches have done something like this for years in different countries where, where they are persecuted, right? China right now is persecuting their what they call home churches. There's a pastor there that just got recently, in the last couple months, he got put in jail. He had a congregation of 1,000, and they started persecuting him and giving him a hard time. His congregation grew to 10,000, so then the government put him in jail. And now his congregation or his supporters are growing even more, obviously. But he was supported by his people, right? And is still supported by his people. But that is ultimately, what God will do. He uses people in low-profile positions, right? Because this pastor, for a very long time, he wasn't following what China wanted him to do, which is why he had grown from 1,000 to 10,000. You're not supposed to have an organized church in China. They'll tolerate you having a small group that meets together, but he truly had a church. He had an organization that just happened to be called a home church, right? And he was supported by his people. And I think now, even though he's in jail, God has a plan for him. But same thing here. God's people are supported by God's people. So, who are the ordinary people God has used in your life to protect, warn, or strengthen you? Any thoughts on that? I can name 1,000 easily. And many people in this church I can name that have been helpful to me. Ordinary people that have helped me, protected me, guided me, strengthened me, given me, kind words when I needed it the most. And I know each of you could probably say the same thing. And I'm so happy to have a church family like I have. I was even praying this morning, thanking God for my church family as much as my biological family. And hopefully you guys have the same belief, same feeling. But God will use ordinary to do the extraordinary. Always. You're not going to. The opposite is what Satan does. He uses the flashy, the prideful, the famous to do his work. God uses the least likely to do his, and that's what makes it even more extraordinary what he does. So, any other thoughts on that? All right, very good. All right, so hey, we're making good time. So, who will read for me 19 through 22? We'll see what happens with these men hiding, even though they're being searched for. Yes.
And the woman took a covering and spread it over the well's mouth and scattered crushed grain on it, so that nothing was known. Then Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house and said, "Where are Hermes and Jonathan?" And the woman said to them, "They have crossed the brook of water." And when they searched and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. Now it happened after they went away that they came up out of the well and went and informed King David. And they said to David, "Arise and cross over the water quickly, for thus is Ahithophel has counseled against you." Then David and all the people who were with him arose and crossed the Jordan. And by dawn, not even one remained who had not crossed the Jordan.
Very good, thank you. So I want to point something out to you. You see here where it said the woman here has hidden these men, right, to save them effectively from Absalom's servants, right? And they come and they ask, "Where is he at?" And I want you to notice, if you know, you got to look at the original wording though to know this. In the original Hebrew, the word that she used there, she says they've crossed over a body, or it says a brook in most translations. Some will say a body of water. But the word can also mean a container of water or a well. So she literally says to these men, well, they've crossed over a well of water, a body of water, a container of water. Well, they have. They're in the well, right? She hasn't lied, has she? She's told entirely the truth here. She hasn't lied. She's being obedient to God while still protecting these men. She told them exactly where they're at. Well, they crossed over that body of water, right? And they didn't find them, because they thought she meant like the river or the lake or whatever, right? Not this well that's literally right there in the town. And so I find that awesome, that when you look at that she truly didn't lie. She was obedient to God. And, you know, it reminds me of our small obedience, right? We should never estimate, or underestimate, I should say, our small obedience. God could save somebody through your one act of obedience, your one phone call, right? Your one act of kindness, your one simple, nice, kind word you say to somebody someday. God could use that one small act of obedience to do grand things. So don't ever think that anything you do is unworthy of God, right? Every act of obedience, even the smallest acts of obedience, can be used by God for grand things. And makes it that much more reason for us to be obedient in everything we do. Yes?
This makes me think, and this may be off course, but just the fact that she worded it the way she worded it, is that a half-truth?
No. Because if you look at the Hebrew word, it can mean a container of water or it's like me saying, how can I put this in a way that sadly, English isn't like Hebrew, where it can mean several different things, usually. But if I say a bird flew through the air, right? It was an eagle. Does that mean I'm saying a half-truth? No. It's still a bird, so I'm still being truthful, right? So I wouldn't say that this is a half-truth, but because of the nature of Hebrew, had they actually listened and thought hard about what she was saying, they should have checked the well, and they didn't. But good question. But it's kind of like that with us, sadly, the English isn't the same as Hebrew, so it's harder to give you an example. But any other thoughts?
I think too, they didn't look deep.
No,
They accepted her at the surface word.
Right.
And ran off because they thought they knew better, saved from
You're right. You're right. Yeah, they may not have taken her seriously, right? And just expected that they didn't stick around. Because, I wouldn't expect them to stick around either. If somebody's chasing after them, I would think that they've run wherever, not stayed literally in the town that they were seen in, waiting for the men that were after them. All right, very good. So, who'll read for me 23 through 26? Yeah, Sean.
Now Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, so he saddled on his donkey and arose and went to his home, and to his city, and set in his house in order, and strangled himself. Thus he died and was buried in the grave of his father. Now David came to Mahanaim, and Absolom crossed the Jordan, and he and all the men of Israel with him. And Absolom set Amias over the army in place of Joab. Now Amias was the son of a man whose name was Ahithophel, Israelite, who went to Abigail, and the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. And Israel and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead.
Very good. Thank you. All right, so a couple things. The obvious thing here, right? Ahithophel, he's upset that his counsel wasn't followed. So much so that he literally commits suicide, right? He sets his house in order and strangles himself, and dies because of that. Couple things, right? Couple thoughts here. One, Ahithophel realizes his plan was the best plan. He knows that, right? He also knows that they're not following his plan, which is the best plan. So what's that mean? More than likely, David is going to survive. And he also knows that he's the one that's given all this counsel so far that Absalom has followed, including defiling the concubines of David, right? He's going to be on David's bad list this year for Christmas, right? The naughty list, obviously. And so I'm sure that has a lot to do with what he's doing here. But the big thing I want you to realize is Ahithophel's self is all tied up in the pride of his counsel, right? He defines himself by this. He defines himself by being the man that people listen to, right? And so when he no longer is the man being listened to, he feels he has no longer a reason to live effectively. That's sad. That's so sad. But that also reminds us that we shouldn't define ourselves by anything but God, right? If we define ourselves by our relationship with God, then no matter what happens to us, no matter what you take away from us, you can't take away that defines us, right? Whereas with Ahithophel, his whole psyche, his whole self is based on this view of who he is as a counselor, right? As somebody that gives counsel to kings. And the moment that goes away, he no longer feels he has reason to live. And we see that in our world today so much. Think of all the people that are defined by anything other than God, that lose that thing and then commit suicide or whatever, or are in deep depression because they've lost that thing, whether that thing be money, right? They define themselves by money. They go broke. They no longer believe they're worthy, right, of even life. They are famous and they have a scandal, which causes them to no longer be famous, or their fame is tainted. How many of those commit suicide, et cetera, et cetera? So we see this in our world today a lot. And it's the same thing that's happening here to Ahithophel, in that he's falling for that same problem of defining himself by the world's standards rather than God's standards. And I'm sure he's fearful of what the consequences are going to be when David is still alive. But betrayal eventually eats the betrayer. And that's what's going on here. Ahithophel betrayed David. And now he is literally being destroyed by his own betrayal. Sin over promises and then hands you a bill you can't pay in the end, right? And self-rule ends in self-destruction. So when a man becomes his own God, when he is defined by himself or his own works, then he becomes his refuge. When it fails, he dies, right? And I want you also to notice here, a lot of Christians notice a resemblance between Ahithophel and Judas here. The fact that he had intimate access to David, right? He betrayed an anointed king, much like Judas betrayed Jesus, an anointed king, and death by hanging. So very, very much a parallel here. And the Bible doesn't, show that parallel, but it's there. Either way, it didn't point it out, but it's there. And it just kind of teaches us that treachery is an old sin, and it has a predictable outcome, predictable ending. So, what are the warning signs that a person is beginning to despair? Different one. How can unresolved bitterness turn into decisions that harm many people, not just ourselves? Or what are the warning signs that a person is beginning to despair rather than repent? Any thoughts? And then this will be our last slide for the day, for the lesson. We'll pick up next week. No thoughts? All right. Obviously, Ahithophel here is angry, like we've talked about. He's angry over Bathsheba as well. And so his bitterness, I'm sure, played into his counsel to David, because the whole concubine thing was totally unnecessary. That was not needed, it was unnecessary, it was pretty gross too, right? And so his bitterness led to decisions that ended up harming far more people than the true person he was angry at, and that's David, right? And that in turn ended up harming him, because look, I can tell you what else is true. His counsel of doing that probably people that tainted some of his counsel, the true counsel that was good later, right? His bitter counsel of doing this thing that was scorched earth, right? Other people probably recognized what I'm recognizing, you're recognizing, is how wicked that was and unnecessary that was. If the true enemy is David, why are you defiling women that have nothing to do with it, right? And so that bitterness of his counsel, that bitterness of his heart led to counsel that then tainted the true good counsel that he gave next, right? And then he defined himself by that, and that was taken from him. So just keep in mind that bitterness in your life can lead to decisions you make or things that you do that can hurt people. And you got to make sure that those decisions you're making aren't based on that bitterness. They're based on truth and goodness instead. Yes.
One thing here in these verses that stands out to me is we don't hear any of these people going to the Lord in prayer about it.
No.
They're all just running on emotion and
Right.
pride and
Right.
different things, their own little motivations.
Right.
Not one verse here mentions that anybody turned to the Lord and sought his
Absolutely.
guidance.
And what's the counter to that is David's first thing he did was that. He went up on the hill and prayed to God for help with this, right? How to thwart Ahithophel's counsel. So absolutely. And again, that's because they define themselves by themselves rather than God. When you define yourself by God, you reach out to what you define yourself by. And so, yeah, very good point. All right. So that'll do it for the class. Any prayers for the prayer list? No? Yep.
Our unsaved children. Unsaved children.
Okay. Unsaved children.
Stepbrother.
Right.
You want me to list them? Or?
Names, if you could. Yeah.
Alicia, Phil, Patricia, Andy, and Garrett.
Alicia, Phil, Patricia, Andy, and Garrett.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. So yeah, we'll keep them in prayer for salvation.
Yes,
Very good.
Yeah.
Any more? All right. All right. Pray for safe for passage and travel for everybody tonight coming to the Christmas banquet and back home, and that we all have good fellowship and enjoy spending the time together as brothers and sisters. All right. And that'll do it. So who will say a prayer for me? We'll end class. You got it, Sean? All right.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time we're able to spend in your word. Lord, we thank you for Charles and the message he's given to us that you presented for him. I ask, Lord, now that you help us to use that message in our daily walk. I also pray, Lord, that we go out our way today, that we're mindful of your children, Lord. We should let
Amen. Awesome, guys. Love y'all. God bless. See y'all tonight or next week.